How you doing, man?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Just we got our like shipment of our CDs in today as our album comes out tomorrow. And we have like a bunch of shows the next couple of weeks. So we were all freaking out, like, oh my God, I hope they CDs get here by the time we have shows, because it really sucked to not have them. And they were on my front porch when I got home a few minutes ago.
So a good day then, a good day thanks to that.
So far, so good.
Particularly as well during this period, man, I know how crazy busy it can be when it's the long build towards an album release. As I say, on my end, it's we're 3 hours away from the release. Yeah. Is it sinking in? Is it feeling real? Are you just kind of like, okay, I'm glad we're here, and the sooner we get it out and out into the world, we can move on, kind of thing?
Yeah, like we've been done with the album since like January, I think, or February. So like, I mean, it's the fourth album we've done. So like we're used to the process of it taking a while, but just when we were done with it, it was kind of like we've spent the last almost 2 years like writing pre-production stuff. And when we're finally done tracking, it's like, well, what the hell do we do with ourselves now for the next like 8 months or 10 months until it actually comes out? Because Unique Leader's release schedule is like super busy. They're releasing stuff like every week, it seems. So, we just kind of, it's like a relief. Like we finally get to put it out after we've been like, we're all almost tired of it already in terms of listening to it, because we've been listening to it for the last like 10 months straight.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that the rest of the world finally gets to hear it.
Do you find you'll end up like living vicariously through other people's reactions? So like it's to say it's
yeah,
for you, but the freshness for fans.
Definitely. Like that's my favorite thing on like with just to see is like YouTube reactions and stuff like that. Cause for us, like we're the reaction period when we heard like the master, for example, like we were all so like stoked for like weeks and weeks. And then like anything, over time, like we rehearse the songs over and over and over again for like 8 hours a day when we have rehearsals. So like we're all just we know all the songs in and out. We have no more like reactions to give to them ourselves, so it's nice. It's exciting to see like what other people will think of it. And I mean, I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing a bunch of them on YouTube once the album's out.
Do you find yourself quite interested in any potential negative reviews, just to kind of get that view and see what people think?
Yeah, like to me, honestly, like I don't, I mean, no one likes reviews that completely shit on your music, but I do like reviews that give like constructive criticism, because as a band, we're always trying to fine tune and dial our sound into as good as we can possibly make it. And while I love reading like rave reviews, I feel like ones that are more honest about the downsides to our records are more helpful to us for what we write in the future.
No, it does. Obviously, constructive criticism is fantastic, but like it's one of those where it's like, well, if you don't rave about this album, I think there might be something wrong with you. And I'd be very interested to read someone who generally didn't like this or any of the previous work and just properly explain themselves. I think that would be fascinating.
Yeah, that's probably what I'm looking forward to the most. Reading reviews is, all right, where did we miss? What did we do wrong? And it's cool because, like, I mean, nowadays, especially this year, like, there's the kind of niche subgenre of like Blackened deathcore has become so much in the forefront of like the deathcore scene that I'm curious as to how other people feel like we stack up against what's out now, like Shadow of Intent or Lorna Shore and stuff like that.
And going back to what you said about being part of the Unique Leader Records roster, considering the weight and the quality on that label and the regular releases in the heavier department, do you feel like, you not only do you fit, but also that you don't get buried amongst the glut of heavy music there?
So one of the big reasons that we signed with them was because of the roster, like top to bottom. It's just endless great bands. And Jamie, who runs the label, actually signed us to Siege of Amida when he used to run that label. for our first two records. So we've worked with him for a long time, and he does a great job managing his label and his releases. And I feel like, at least in my experience of it, like we've anytime we've ever needed anything, he's always on top of it. I never feel like we're kind of buried in the mix of like the 20-30 bands that they have or anything like that. Like when we needed our album budget or stuff for music videos, merch, like everything, he's just, here you go, have at it, make me proud, that sort of thing.
That's awesome, man. Listen, I want to take you back then. We're going to go back in time a little bit, 18 months or so. How you been holding up on a personal level, pandemic wise?
So it was very like, it was a strange experience, because for all of us, like the band isn't like our full-time thing, at least not anymore. Like we still, it's our primary focus outside of like our normal lives. But like we weren't hit as hard as bands that like tour full-time, that got like all of that really like just taken away for almost 2 years. And I think it actually, in some ways, it allowed the kind of music scene in general to kind of take like a reset. And because the touring market was getting really oversaturated, and there's so many bands with so many releases, and I feel like it was just getting hard to navigate, like rather than everyone focused on certain bands, it was every single band on earth was getting like a little bit of attention from, like, I don't know if that's the best way to explain it. Like I think that it helped, it slowed things down, but it wasn't necessarily a negative thing, because what it did for a lot of bands was gave them all the time to not have to fight with like deadlines and release schedules. Like everybody got to kind of make a record in their own time, because there wasn't the added pressure of everything else that comes with being in a band, like touring and stuff like that. So I think this year and early into next year, you're going to see like a lot of really awesome releases from a lot of really awesome bands because of that. And everybody kind of had to experience the same like doubt and, wondering like how long this is going to last for. And are we ever going to get back to normal, or are we ever going to be able to tour again? Like, I feel like it didn't really shut down most bands, even though it took away a lot of bands' primary source of income for a while. And now that it's starting to let up a little bit, like even smaller shows that I've seen anyways, like are still packed with people because no one's had concerts for so long. So I don't know how long that will last for, but hopefully it sticks, because I think the biggest thing to take away from the pandemic is that it kind of revealed to the world what our society is like without art, because it wasn't accessible to anybody really. And we all saw it, especially in America, like last year, at how tense things got with political things and protests and riots and stuff. And like it's kind of what happens to people when they don't have an outlet. They have focus it all into one really negative space, and it blows up. So I think a lot of bands' albums are going to reflect that period of time, and that's absolutely what our new album reflects. I think is just the kind of the period of being in limbo while our societal structure kind of falls apart a bit.
It's fascinating to say that, particularly when we talk about the artists and the time. Everyone we've spoken to, we often ask the question, give us something positive that came out from the period that you can think of. And most bands and artists talk about having more time to perfect an album, or do this or do that, and so on. So hearing you say it is amazing. I wonder, do you think that will stick going forward, that the learning curve of going, okay, giving ourselves more time meant a more quality product? Do you think that will continue, or do you think we'll end up slipping back into the old way of doing things where we're just touring nonstop?
I think that will kind of vary from band to band, because for pretty much every band, your primary source of income is touring. Like we don't make this ever since the whole streaming thing kind of became the main way that people consume music. Musicians and artists don't make money off of album sales. That's been true for a while now. So I like, for us personally, because we're all, we're a little bit older and we've done this for a long time. Like, we're all kind of in a place where like we would rather put out quality over quantity. Like, I would rather lose maybe some momentum from not touring for like 18 months straight if it meant that we get the best album we could possibly put together, especially now after kind of comparing our new record to the last one, which was not necessarily rushed, but it was a lot less, like, there was a lot less to it. There was a lot less went into creating it than this one. This one, we really like sat down and hammered out pre-production for like a year almost before finally deciding on like the final songs that we're going to make the album with, and the song structures that we're finally going to settle on. And I think almost all of those songs, except for maybe two of them, all started as almost completely different and had different structures. And we just kind of had the time to like record them, at least in demo form, and then listen to them for a while. And then the more you listen to it, the more you're like, okay, well, this part kind of isn't necessary, or this part should transition to this part. It will sound better. And we had the time to like pick it apart and put it back together the right way. And so now in doing that, to me, like I always want to do it that way, as opposed to trying to just rush it out for the sake of getting it out. Because I think, you've seen a lot of bands, just in rock music and really any genre, I would say, like, almost all of them have kind of the sophomore slump after their big like hit record, because the pressure, focus on putting a product out.
Yeah.
And there's very, very few bands that I can think of that never have. But yeah, like there's, I mean, I'm not sure if I could think of one band that didn't have like a mediocre album after their great one. It's difficult. Maybe one that I could probably think of would be like Mastodon, but Mastodon doesn't put out an album every year. They take a good few years between records, and the results of that are usually a really great album.
You could apply it to a lot of other media as well. You think some of like horror movies, a big horror movie that comes out and blows up, the sequel often.
Yeah.
It
never has the same magic to it. And that's usually because everyone wants to capitalize on the momentum that they've built off of something great. And it's hard to stay patient, because even as an artist or as the band, like, you also want to keep building on that momentum as much as possible. And it's really difficult to like, to make yourself create in general. Like, as an artist, you can't force you can force yourself to make stuff, to write music, to, write a movie script. But at that point, it's not the same as when it just kind of comes out naturally. And for it to come out naturally, it takes time. It takes time to replenish artistic vision and stuff,
Yeah, and you'll get found out. The fan base will find you out if you're not, if your heart's not in it, or you're half-arsing it, as it were. You will be found out, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, considering you said 4 albums to date, debut back in 2008, do you think you can draw a clear line that connects from where you started to where you are now?
Line in terms of what?
Into how your career's gone and how your sound has gone.
Oh, okay. So definitely not a straight line. I think we've just we always like had I think a big part of what determines success for most bands has a lot more to do with timing than people realize.
Okay.
Like, you can have the best album ever that that's just not the right time for it. Like, historically, even like Zeppelin, no one, when they were first really out, like, no one understood them. Kiss is another good example. Like, it just wasn't quite, they needed something to happen at the right time in order for them to really catch on. And for us, when we were first kind of, on our first run with the first 2 records, deathcore was a really new concept for the most part. And to us, like we didn't even feel like we were a deathcore band because we were in the middle of like when it was starting, you know. To us, we were just like a death metal band that had keyboards on it, and a black metal influence. But at the time, our little kind of corner of that genre wasn't really what the mass audience for it was listening to. Everybody was focused more on the death metal side of it, you know, because like Suicide Silence, Whitechapel, Job for a Cowboy, those were like the big pillars of like the creation of the genre. And for us, we were always kind of the oddball because we weren't quite heavy enough for tours like that. And it's not like we could go do black metal tours either because we're not exactly a black metal band, especially the older stuff, you know. So that like the longer time has gone on, we found more of a way to kind of seamlessly fuse the two rather than being like, you know, some parts are deathcore parts and some parts are black metal parts, or you know, like it's more of one cohesive sound now. And going forward, that's what we are and what we will be. And I think we'll find a lot, things will go a lot better that way for us.
Yeah, I find it interesting, the whole where do you fit in a bill, whereas now you're listening to what you're doing now and it's like you can fit on any bloody bill. Put you on any bill, you will happily fit. The black metal crowd will love you, the death metal crowd will love you. Stick you on a rock show, it's still music, it'll fit.
Well, that's that. Like we can, especially because we have so much catalog now with 4 albums. Like we can curate a set that would fit with anything. Like one of, you know, a band that I've always wanted to tour with is Dark Funeral. And not that we're like as black metal as Dark Funeral is, but in a 5-song set, we can play 5 songs that would make us fit pretty well with them. It's not like, you know, we just aren't playing the super heavy ones, but we have others that are a lot more black metal focused, you know. And just like if we had to do, you know, a deathcore tour with like Suicide Silence, we have a good 5 or 6 song set that's got a lot of breakdowns in it that still isn't quite as heavy as like they are, but it's enough to appease a crowd like that.
I would like to hope that even if you didn't do that and you tailored a set to what you wanted, that metal fans these days are more open-minded. I'd love to believe that. Yeah,
me too. And sometimes like you know, like we're doing, for example, the end of this month, we're doing a run with Battlecross, which is, they're like, you know, kind of a thrash metal band almost. But it's a very like universal metal crowd. Those are always my favorite crowds to play to also. It's like where we don't have to like try to like make our set appeasing to them, where we can just kind of play the songs that we want, and it's like a healthy mix of both, and they usually still go over well because, you know, fans like that just want to hear heavy music regardless of what little subgenre window it fits in.
Even more nowadays, we talked earlier on about the fact that shows coming back and how packed out they are. Now people just want to hear some metal, just want a reason to circle pit and headbang, you know.
That's how I wish the entire metal scene was, you know?
Yeah, just if only, but that's a deeper conversation. So there's an argument to say this might be the most intense album you've released, but that's taken into account. You've got a couple of guests on this album, David John Samoch of Signs of the Swarm and Jamie Graham of Viscera. How did those guests come about?
So Signs of the Swarm is from Pittsburgh, where we're from. So we've known those guys a long time, and we're all both in the same scene, in the same circles of people. So with David, it was just when we wrote that song, we were trying to think of like who we could get to, you know, who would sound good as a feature. And I thought it would be cool for him because he doesn't, at least as far as I've heard, like hasn't really used his voice in more of the black metal space, you know? So I thought it'd be a fun challenge for him to kind of get, because most features he does are for like, you know, bands that sound similar to them or more deathcore side of things, where, you know, people are used to hearing his voice. Whereas in something like our music, it kind of gives him a space to experiment a little bit. And because again, they're from the same city, like he was able to come to our studio, and him and Chris like sat there and kind of wrote out each part, and they got to like really collaborate fully on that's why he's on like the whole song rather than one little like kind of section of it. because we kind of wrote it designed as like a call response kind of thing. And then Jamie, I've told Jamie for years that he needs to just quit all of this death metal business and go sing for like some huge rock band somewhere, because he has just a fantastic singing voice. And I've told him that for years and years. And this time, like, our schedules just aligned enough to where he was able to pencil us in for a day in the studio. And I didn't have we had no idea what he was going to do to it. We just sent him this, like, he knew this, like, he had the songs already, like the pre-production versions. Because again, he runs the label, but we just told him like the kind of timestamps, and like I just said, sing something, just surprise me. And the very first thing he sent was what made the album, because it was like, this is perfect. I had no idea what to expect, really. I mean, I know what his voice sounds like, and I love it. And we picked the most melodic song on the record for that, because that one just, I felt like his voice would really contribute to it, rather than sound like, a random feature in a random space in one of the other songs. I kind of gave him like a nice long bridge section to take over. And, it's the title track to the record. It's arguably, for us as the band, it's probably our favorite. Yeah. It's one that we can't play live though, because none of us can sing like that, unfortunately. Unless we happen to be on a tour with Viscera, which, who knows, maybe that will happen someday. Our keyboardist is he's been like practicing it a little bit. Just Jamie has so much range. It's like those high, like shrieky singing stuff that he can do is very like, that's not an easy vocal technique by any stretch. So our keyboardist is working on it. He's got like up until the last like 2 lines, I think he's got down pretty well to where we can get away with it. But it just, it's never going to sound the same unless Jamie himself is like singing it. So
try and make it a crowd thing instead. Somehow make it so the crowd sing it. So even if they're singing it poorly, it doesn't matter.
That's true. Maybe we'll try that angle a little bit more.
That level of trust and relaxation that you have about, with guests like that and in your own music, do you think that's quite reflective of where the Breathing process is as a unit these days?
I think so. Like, it's especially with, just people that are in bands that really have done this for a while. I trust, David, Signs of the Swarm is, I guess, newer compared to us in a sense, but David's been in bands for years and years and years. Like, he was in another one that was from this area for a long time before he joined Signs of the Swarm. And Jamie's been doing different bands since we started, pretty much. Like, he was also an artist then. So like, I just once you reach like a certain level of professionalism, I feel like when I sent them the songs, like, I didn't even think twice about like, oh, I don't know how this is going to go, or I hope they can pull it off. It's like, I know they're going to just knock it out of the park, and I just have to sit here and wait for them to send me the files back. And that's pretty much exactly what happened. Like, well, David came to our studio to track it, but it was like every take he did, I was like, I don't even know what to tell you to like fix. There's nothing, like, it's try it again if in case you think you can get a better voice or something. But most of his feature was like the first take, if not the second. Incredible. He rarely messed up anything. Like, his voices were all crazy. And there's one scream in there at the end that got kind of buried in the mix a little bit that was absolutely nuts. And that was the one like blemish that I was kind of like bummed about when we got the master back. Is like, but again, like when you're at the mastering stage, it's like, I can't be like, hey, can you rip this whole thing open again and just tweak this one voice like 2 decibels and then re-render it all and run it through the mastering? It's just too much to like. Of course. Yeah, you have to kind of you'll always find something that you want to change if you don't just cut it off and say like, okay, this is it. Yeah, you've got to just put it down. Yeah, exactly. Otherwise, we'd still be working on our album now if we had that kind of luxury,
No, of course, but
what
there's
would have made
not
it.
anymore. And if people don't know, we've not mentioned it yet. 8th of October, which as of time recording is tomorrow, via Unique Leader Records, Labyrinthian. Are you kind of hoping that 2022 is a busier year for you when it comes to live shows? I know it's hard to confirm. I know it's hard to even say anything beyond hope more than that, because we don't know what the state of the world is going to be like in a couple of months. It's just really is the plan to be busy.
Yeah, like we've spent, since the album's been done, like I said, we've been kind of just sitting on our twiddling our thumbs for the last like 10 months. But we've spent a lot of time rehearsing and building our live show to something that really, like, we're trying to attract people to, because that's kind of always been our thing, is that, you know, in order to really experience the kind of energy that we're trying to portray, you have to see it in person. Like, it's hard to swallow someone with atmosphere, like, while they're listening on their phone or on their computer speakers or something. Like, you need that loud experience of it. And we're a very energetic live band. So we're all really hoping that we get to do, you know, some more tours and stuff next year. We're really trying to come to Europe. That's like on top of the list of things, because we've had like 2 different tours that were confirmed that we were on for over there, that have both like gotten canceled or postponed for circumstances. And I think just you know, we want to be known as a live band.
Yeah.
You know, and have that kind of thing to where you have to come, like, you have to come experience it. It's never going to be the same listening to it on your own, you know?
Yeah, you know this as much as I do. There's nothing quite like live music, particularly in your field of music, the Blackened deathcore side of things. It's always going to be much more spectacular. I have to ask you this last question then. So one of the things that kind of gets banded around in regards to the build to this album has been that it's the breathing process, taking back the Blackened deathcore metaphorical crown. What do you make of that? Or is it something you're just kind of like, you know what, it sounds cool, don't really care though?
So this is actually something that's I've seen come up a lot lately, with people, you know, because like I said before, Blackened anything at the moment is really, like, you know, popular. And I always, it pisses me off to no end when I read comments that are like, oh, you guys ripped off Lorna Shore, or you rip off Shadow of Intent. And it's not that, you know, I understand that we all sound really similar, but like, you know, our first album came out in 2008, and like, none of it. It's important to me that people understand that, like, even with bands like them, you know, like, they're both extremely good at what they're doing. And if anyone really took the time to listen to any of us, they would all understand that we all offer very different interpretations of just a similar sound. But that's true of any genre or any subgenre of metal. Like, when Metallica came out, was Exodus and Slayer just ripping off Metallica? Even if they all still were allowed to exist in the same space, and all succeeded in some way, because if there was only one band in every genre, then there would be very limited amounts of music that you could listen to, you know. And I think that all of us, like, the fact that we all exist, and the fact that we're all competent enough bands to be, like, you know, signed or touring or whatever, if anything, for the consumer, it creates a competition in a healthy way, almost, that all of us are now going to strive to kind of to put out our best possible material, because it has to compete against another. And that's a good thing for music in general, for the metal genre, you know. Like, so as far as like the crown, like, I mean, yeah, we're all going for the crown of anything. Like, that's the point of, you know, doing stuff in general, is to try to be the best at it. And, you know, I think that, like, there's been so many albums this year alone, like Lorna Shore's album, Shadow of Intent's new songs are ridiculously good. Mental Cruelty's album is fucking incredible. And like, they were like a they were like a slam death metal band for most of their existence thus far. And they just kind of stepped in this space and knocked it out of the park, So I think that there's absolutely, with deathcore being such a niche genre to begin with, like the more of us that come out that are good at this particular thing, it just helps it grow, and it growing equals success for all of us. But the notion that like there can only be one and they're the, like, I mean, I guess there's not many people that, especially now that we have, kind of a better press campaign than our previous album, like more often than not, I see a lot of people correct those comments that tell people like, oh, we've existed way longer than either of those bands.
Yeah. Because
we have, and it's annoying to read when somebody who doesn't know who we are tells me that like we're somehow copying someone else's sound when we've always been consistently this for our entire existence, except for when I was like in high school and we were like a local band, we sounded like a lot different. As far as like being a signed band in 2007, we have always maintained this sound. We've just gotten better and better at it, but we're also older. Like those other bands that I mentioned are younger than we are. And, we never claimed like ownership over this like subgenre at all. Like we just played what we wanted to play like any band does. And there's not like you could find in any band you listen to, you could find someone else that they quote unquote ripped off if you wanted to. Like there's very few bands that sound there's only one, like Radiohead, like there's only one Radiohead, but Coldplay came out and kind of knocked them out of the park in terms of album sales.
Just a bit.
And I mean, granted, Coldplay sucks ass now, but their first two records were fucking awesome. And I'm a huge Radiohead fan. So like when I heard those first two, it was like, wow, this reminds me of Radiohead, but it's like easier to digest. I love this. And then they went to shit and started making pop songs. But, like every era, every genre, there's like, or, take like the hip hop genre, for example, like they all sound pretty similar in one another. Like very few of them are really in their own lane, but no one accuses them of ripping off someone. Like there's no point.
You're absolutely right. It seems often to be sort of localized of us. I mean, you say hip hop, I think of someone like grime, and grime is in particularly, very, very much a very small thing in this country, but it's all very similar sounding. But again, nobody's accusing so-and-so of ripping off so-and-so and things like that. So it's a strange one.
It's an overall sound. Like, how can you own that at all?
But I also think it's important to suggest that, like, you're not stamping on the fingers of people who are trying to climb up to your platform. You're helping them up by enhancing the sound and being an elder statesman, if you want, of that and stuff like that. Everyone wins, as you said yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and it elevates everyone else's, as far as us, like the artists are concerned, it's like, it's healthy competition. And I think that's good for anything, any aspect of life, even not even just music. Like, it improves the quality of everyone's music, because if I think, like, me personally, in my heart, I think Mental Cruelty's album is better than our album. I'm sure plenty of fans will disagree with me on that. Whatever, I'm happy that they do. I love our album. We created it. I'll always love it. But now, having listened to that, I'm like, fuck, we gotta up some things on the next one. Ooh. Because we've gotta. That's what someone else did, and it's competing in the same space as ours. So I want to make our next album better than that. And I'm sure they'll listen to our album or Lorna Shore's album or Shadow of Intense album, Worm Shepherd's album. The new, like, I listened to some of Worm Shepherd's new album because we played with them like a couple weeks ago. It's nuts. It's absolutely insane. And again, it's like, oh man, like there's all these new perspectives, because like I said before, we're all different people from different like eras of music in general. So like we're not going to put out the exact same thing. None of us. Like we're all different people. We're different artists. We have different influences, so like we're all going to interpret that sound differently than the next, but we're all just continuously trying to raise the bar with it. And I think that will result in just great fucking records that everybody can enjoy. You know?
Yeah, I think the perfect way to cut off there is to add as well that just go out and listen to all his records, but of course, make sure you listen to Labyrinthian by the Breathing Process. It is out tomorrow. Jordan, thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Thank you.
That's it, mate. That's it. We're done.
All right.
No worries. Thank you. Thank you.
I've been dying to answer that last question for the last like few interviews I've done, and no one asked me it.
Oh, really?
So,
okay.
Because we get a lot of messages and stuff about that. Like, you know, while I wish that more people knew that we were kind of I wouldn't even call us like the originator of it. We were just one of the first. Like when we came out, there was us, there was Abigail Williams, and there was Winds of Plague. Winds of Plague we got compared to every fucking day, but we sounded nothing like them. The only thing that we had in common is that we both had hot girl keyboardists. That was literally it. And they had nothing to do with black metal. They were like, they sounded more like Bleeding Through, but just heavier. And to us, we were like trying to be more black metal. Abigail Williams wanted nothing to do with deathcore at all, and that's why they changed so much.
Yeah.
You know, so like I wish more people understood that like we were one of the first to kind of bring this concept forward, and I feel like that would help us grow a lot as kind of like the, you know, the OGs of this kind of space. And I'm hoping that's what this record does, because I think a lot of younger kids will like it in comparison to all those other bands that they are just finding out about now.
Yeah.
But we're also kind of like, you know, I want us to be looked at as, you know, we were kind of the original version of this, you know. Hopefully it helps us going forward.
Yeah, man. Hopefully. Well, hopefully we'll get to see you some point in the UK next year as well.
Yeah, me too. Looking like the summer, I think, is where we're aiming for.
Okay. Hopefully
that will happen, as I've been dying to come over there. And you know, guess we'll see. So see what happens.
Thank you very much for watching. You can check us out on gbhbl.com, as well as on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Tumblr. Go to Patreon to help us out over there. That's patreon.com/gbhbl, as well as Big Cartel, where you can find some of our merchandise. We have a podcast running on SoundCloud and Apple Podcasts. And of course, if you like this video, do us a favor, hit the subscribe button and help the channel grow. Games, horror, and heavy metal. What else is life for?